Last week, I traveled to Salt Lake City, Utah for the 2023 iScan Technical Training Conference. I had the privilege of attending these classes and learning from some of the greatest instructors in our field, including Justin Morgan and John Thornton. I'd like to extend a special thank you to the Institute for Automotive Business Excellence, iScan from Autoland, and Industry Attempts for making this possible. If you are interested in future events, be sure to reach out to me or follow them on social media. Thanks for watching.
Car is back 3 weeks later, same problems. No start. Ignition turns on, but wipers run all the time. Just a quick tip, what does the wipers coming on as soon as you turn the car on mean? It does not mean FRM.
Communication.
Be more basic. What does it mean immediately? You have a network problem, period. Now, depending on what the car is depending on what the network is, but it immediately means that you have a network problem. We all make sense? I don't want us to blind ourselves and say it's always specifically, no, you have a network problem. That's it. You have identified a network problem. Why do you have to cycle the key on LIN-bus when you are eliminating things? Because LIN-bus is what they call fault tolerant. If it sees a circuit problem with LIN, the master module shuts it down. So if you just unplug stuff, it's never going to come back up. If you make a change, you have to cycle that key to reset the bus. If I unplug A, cycle the key, and it comes back up, A was my problem. But if I don't cycle that key, I'm never going to know that was my problem. All right? Very important detail there. Yeah, I'm going to train you not to do that anymore, though, and I'm going to explain why. Specifically on N16s and N18s, you can have no crank signal and get an RPM. I do not play that game anymore of, oh, I have an RPM number on my live data. You don't know what cars it will substitute cam sensor for. You want to know if it's got a crank signal? Scope it. It ain't that hard, all right? This coil technically only needs 2 wires to operate. It's no different than a Ford ignition coil. Power, ground control fires it. The unused voltage has to be grounded through this shunt, or it finds a process to go back to home. It's the computer. That is an excellent question, though. Nobody ever asked me that. Nobody ever wants to know why there's 3 wires on that coil. It'll operate with 2 for a second anyway. When you don't have that good ground or you have a faulty coil, the most sensitive thing in the BMW DME is the BSD circuit. On the Mini Cooper, because it's a totally different DME, the most sensitive thing in it is the central processor. This is normally a 30-person class. I appreciate you guys playing along. Hopefully you got something out of it. I know that you only had so many choices for classes, and you gave me one of your choices. I appreciate that. Hopefully you learned something. Senior Kid back there is going to make sure that the handout gets swapped in the app. It will actually say full workbook with answers, so that way you'll know it's been changed, and you can just download that, and with your notes and that, you have everything that we've done today, and hopefully we learned something, right? That's it. That's all I got.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for choosing to hang out with me this afternoon as we discuss VW Audi Drivability. I have a few goals for our class this afternoon. Number one, we are going to focus on drivability concerns with VW Audi engine management systems. I want to try to really, use scan data to our advantage. Would you agree that VW Audis have plenty of scan data available? Yes. I mean, when VW Audi went to the UDS communication protocol, now we have hundreds and hundreds of data pits, correct? I mean, sometimes in German, but most of the time, it's not. So there's a tremendous amount of data that allows us to analyze a lot of these systems pretty quickly, pretty efficiently. Also, I'm going to talk about using a scope when it's appropriate. I am a fan of a scope, but that doesn't mean everything needs to be done with a scope. A lot can be done with scan data. And you'll see that I use the Rostec VCDS. And there's a lot of high quality scan tools available. You will notice that there will be no Otis slides in my presentation. I own Otis. You can't do programming in a mobilizer efficiently without Otis, but Otis has somewhat of a disadvantage in what can't it do? You can look at data, it's got all the data you need, but what can't you do with Otis that you could do with Snap-on as an example? What's that? Graphic. Yeah, you can't graph. So if you look at the green, and I don't ask trick questions. If I do ask a trick question, I'll tell you in advance. But if you look at the green, what can you say about those green cranking current compression pulses? They look pretty darn even, correct? Yeah, that's really it. That's all I'm interested in. So I open it up some more, and it looks to me, again, I don't know what the compression is, but I know I got a misfire number 4. I suspect it's mechanical, but right now it looks like the valves are sealing, piston is obviously going up, they don't have a ring issue, a wall issue. Fair enough? And whatever's going on in 4, in terms of compression, it's the same in the other 3. We good? So this test doesn't take a lot of time, and there's a lot more value than what I just said, but I'll talk about a little more detail as we progress. I just want to kind of give you an intro. So I'm thinking to myself, well, what else can I do? You know, is there something I can do where I can take more advantage of the data that's available to me? And the answer is, yeah, there is. I can look at knock sensor activity. Because we all know what knock sensors do. They're supposed to measure combustion noise, right? But can they measure other types of noise, like a loose rod or something? Not what they're designed to do, but they can do it. And that can help us diagnose sometimes. So, you know, I find the IDEs, sometimes called diagnostic identifiers with the UDS protocol. I find the IDEs for the knock sensor, and you see that there's 4 knock sensor data pits. I'm 100% sure you already know this, but I'm going to say it anyway to make myself a little bit more comfortable. When I go into Irwin, the aftermarket provider for VW Audi service information, and pull the wiring diagram, I find there's just a single knock sensor, single G61. Little cut and paste here. And so both wires have activity. If you were to put a scope on both wires, which I'll do, but if you put a scope on both wires, they have activity. Some manufacturers, one wire is pulled to ground and the other wire has activity, but these have both activity. So just pointing out, the scan tool shows us knock on a per cylinder basis. There's only one knock sensor. The only two that are moving are 1 and 3. And if you take a look at it, 1 and 3 are the blue and the violet. Would everybody agree that the blue and the violet is kind of synced to the RPM? So as soon as I push the pedal, everybody agrees we have knock activity? And that's one of the benefits of graphing. We can see the relationship. So I do this numerous times, and you can see right here that the RPM went up, but there was no activity shown. I'm not sure why, but the other times it has. So I did not expect this. I was hoping that I would see knock for cylinder number 4. For the life of me, I can't figure out why I'm seeing knock on 1 and 3 when there's nothing wrong with 1 and 3. And I'm not going to change my mind as the story goes. There is nothing wrong with 1 and 3. So I'm going to tie this together. And this is the benefit of scan data. So I have the engine idling. Number 1 is your reference. So I know you know this. Just keep it in the back of your mind, 1, 3, 4, 2. So red is my number 1 ignition trigger, and the green and the orange are my 2 knock sensor wires. Single knock sensor, each wire has its own similar AC output. I'm going to start to get knock, and I want you to look, not just that there is knock, but the position of the knock pulses, there's 2 of them, relative to my number 1 in red. So I got rid of the crank. I heard somebody say it.
1 and 3.
1 and 3. Would you agree? If the firing order is 1, 3, 4, 2, and red is on number 1, please take my word for that. You can kind of see it looks like 1, 3. So this is a movie, scope movie. This is me elevating the RPM. You can see the number 1 squeezing together. And again, yes, there's knock. I have the green on top of the gold, but just kind of look at its placement relative to number 1. Whatever degree is in the same spot pretty much every time. Yeah. For the life of me, I cannot put this together. So I want you to have them in your handout. So I can duplicate this every time, hot or cold. I can always make the problem occur, but I'm no closer to having an idea what's wrong with it. So Pico, this is the scope that I use, and when I talk about tools, I'm not trying to make a sales pitch. I just want you to have tools that, of course, get the job done. For me, I like the Pico scope. One of the reasons I like the Pico scope, it has a feature called rulers where I can divide the screen into divisions. So I can divide this up into 4 180-degree divisions, 1, 3, 4, 2. So you'll see that pop right now. And if you look at the bottom, I'll point over there in a second, you'll see it says 0, 180, 360, 540. Everybody see that over there? So I reference it to number 1. That's the trigger signal. That's right where the plug fires. 180 degrees, 360. So that would be 1, 3, 4, and 2. Clearly, 4 and 2 have no activity, correct? Now, if I know number 1, and if I know the firing order, I can make this next note. Those are power strokes, correct? Those are power strokes. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why number 4 doesn't have knock. Number 4 does miss. It's related to the noise, but it shows absolutely no knock, and there's nothing wrong with cylinders 1 and 3. And this is where scopes can sometimes be handy. So there's a lot of ways you can look at this. I have some notes here. There's a lot of ways that you can look at it, and I will tell you, I'll take luck when I can get it. And this I got lucky on this. I thought to myself, let me get rid of 1, 3, and 2, and let me focus on number 4. If this is number 4 on power, right after that it's going to be number 4 on exhaust, agreed? So let me kind of look at just number 4 by itself. So this is just number 4. I'm ignoring what I know about 1 and 3, just looking at number 4. Look at the first burst. This would be the piston coming up on compression, then transitioning down to power, correct? So we ask ourselves, what happens? Now, what happens at that point? Well, I said one of them, and you know everything I'm about to say anyway. Well, the piston changes direction, correct? And the intake valve should be what? Starting to open, right? And the exhaust valve should be closing. And that's when the light went off in my head. What kind of technology does this thing have? Well, it's direct injected, it's turboed, it's got variable cam timing, and valve lift. One other thing to mention, look at my feed in green. There's the noise. Everybody see the slight dip there? I've always kind of considered this to be like a rubber band effect. When that 9 amps of current flows through the coil, it does what to the source voltage momentarily? Pulls it down. Just like when you crank an engine over and that starter motor pulls 150 amps, that 12.6 goes down to 11, correct? It's just a momentary pull. Every time a coil electrically turns on and off, it pulls the feed down. If you don't have a current probe and you want to move quick through the vehicle, and your goal is to just answer the question, does it look like all 4, 5, 6, 8 coils are turning on and off? All you have to do is go on a feed of any of the coils. We good on this? Because if you look now, again, I can't point with this, but if you look now, you can see the dip. When I have the coil disconnected, everybody agree there's no dip? So this is a trick that can be done with any car. It makes no difference. Because coil unplugged coils, they all pull current. You know, this is not like the old days. They pull some pretty significant current. They load that temporarily. We good? Also, when you look at most high pressure pumps, now I have a reason, this isn't trivia for me, I have a reason for this discussion. Most high pressure pumps are either driven by a 3-lobe drive that's on the camshaft or a 4-lobe drive, agreed? Now, so by itself, that seems to be trivia. But if you've ever had a timing chain that's jumped on a CCTA engine and there's no cam sensor on the exhaust cam, and the exhaust cam has jumped 3 or 4 teeth, not only will the engine run poorly if it even starts, but if you can get it to run, or if you can crank it, you'll notice that the rail pressure and desired pressure can be a 200, 300, 400 PSI apart. And sometimes they will set high pressure pump control codes, but no cam timing codes. So this is a function of pump timing. Now, pump timing is not mechanical because we don't time gasoline high pressure pumps, correct? We install them, but there's still pump timing. It's supposed to be fixed, but what's supposed to be what happens are two different things. So imagine for a moment the RPM is stable, and the PCM says, I want to go from 500 to 2,000 PSI. So RPM is stable. How do we do that? There's only one way to do that. If this is our current, say our 5 to 10 amps, that's bottom dead center, that's top dead center. Right now, that valve was closed here. So if you want to build more rail, what is the only thing the PCM can do as far as timing is concerned? It's got to close the valve sooner, correct? So it's kind of like building compression in a gas engine. If you have a full stroke, you can build a lot of pressure. If you close the valve later, you have less stroke. Agreed? This is the timing. This is the timing. This is how you build rail. I want more rail, turn it on closer to the bottom of that center. I want less rail, turn it on closer to the top of that center. We good on this? VW Audi has always had data PIDs for this. There's always been a data PID telling us what they were doing. And I'm going to show you a couple examples of that. I think we need to know that. It gives us a good sense of what the PCM is trying to accomplish. Welcome back. We are going to continue. So I'm going to move now to engine mechanical testing. And I kind of hate to say this, but it seems like as technology has improved and machining methods have improved, we continue to see many types of engine problems, from rings, valve sealing, it just continues. You would think it would kind of decrease. So I work on a pretty good mix of vehicles. I'm not exclusive to VW Audi. I work on a variety of vehicles. And the one thing that appears to be fairly consistent across, whether it be a GM or a Honda or Subaru, is there are plenty of mechanical problems. So I thought I would have a section, I got plenty of examples as well, regarding engine mechanical testing. And once upon a time, the compression gauge and a cylinder leakage tester, a vacuum gauge, were probably our primary tools, right? So I'm going to tell you I don't use compression gauges anymore. I will never use a compression gauge again. And I will try to convince you not to ever use a compression gauge either. Now, I will qualify that. There's nothing wrong with a compression gauge in terms of accuracy. If you have a quality compression gauge, it's just as accurate as a pressure transducer. The problem with a compression gauge, it has what in the hose or at the base of a Schrader valve. That's the problem. And I'll be back to that. So let's do some engine mechanical testing. The lowest one here is about 80-some PSI. Why won't a gauge ever identify that, regardless of what your ear hears? Because that Schrader is going to capture the highest, and it's never going to be any lower, correct? Enjoy the rest of your training event. Thank you.